They laughed at me as if I were a burden, their mocking voices cutting deeper than any blade. My family, the very people I had sacrificed for, sat around the table exchanging sly glances, their whispers coated in scorn. They thought I was weak, washed up, irrelevant. Their words weren't just insults, they were betrayals, each one pressing down on the years I had carried them through hardship. Yet as I sat in silence, I felt no urge to argue or defend myself. They mistook my quiet for defeat, not realizing that silence can be the sharpest weapon. For buried within their arrogance lay my secret, one I had protected with patience and foresight. While they mocked, I thought of the will locked safely away, a truth that would shatter their laughter into stunned silence. They believed they held power over me. Soon they would see how wrong they were. In the beginning, my family was my pride and joy. The house often echoed with laughter during Sunday dinners, when everyone gathered around the long wooden table. The smell of freshly baked bread, the sound of children playing in the yard, and the warmth of shared stories made it feel like nothing could ever divide us. I watched my children grow into adults, marry, and bring new lives into the fold. For years, I believed the foundation of our family was unshakable, built on trust, respect, and the sacrifices I had made silently behind the scenes. At first, those sacrifices were acknowledged. A grateful glance, a heartfelt thank you, a hug. That spoke volumes. But slowly, the appreciation faded, replaced by a quiet assumption that my giving would never end. Small cracks appeared in the fabric of our unitized missive remarks when I offered advice, whispers of impatience when I moved slower than before. What once felt like respect turned into patronizing nods, as if my words carried less weight simply because my hair had turned gray. I noticed entitlement creeping in during small moments. A son-in-law joking about how old folks shouldn't worry about money. A daughter brushing aside my concerns with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Gifts I gave were taken without acknowledgement, as though they were expected rather than cherished. And while the smiles at family gatherings remained, I could sense something hollow growing beneath them. Quiet arrogance. A hunger for more. Still, I told myself not to worry. Families go through phases, I thought. Perhaps I was imagining it. But every time I looked at their faces, I felt the weight of distance, as though the bond we once shared had thinned into something fragile. Love still existed, yes, but it was tangled with threads of greed and carelessness. And in that shift, I felt the first stirrings of betrayal, subtle but undeniable. It began with laughter, soft at first, but sharp enough to cut. I remember sitting in the living room while the younger ones chattered about investments, careers, and new houses. When I offered a piece of advice, drawn from years of surviving hardships they could not imagine, one of them smirked and said, "That was the old way. Things don't work like that anymore." The others chuckled politely, but I felt the sting. They weren't laughing at the advice. They were laughing at me. Over time, the laughter grew bolder. A nephew once nudged another and whispered loud enough for me to hear, "He's still living in the past. Poor thing doesn't realize his time is over." My cheeks burned, but I swallowed the humiliation, unwilling to create a scene. When I dropped a plate at dinner, the daughter-in-law quipped, "Maybe we should get plastic dishes, less breakage for old hands." Everyone laughed, except me. What hurt most was not the words themselves, but the shift they revealed. I had gone from being the pillar of the family, the one who carried burdens silently, who worked tirelessly to ensure they had opportunities I never did, to being treated like a relic, fragile and useless. They saw me as powerless, irrelevant, perhaps even a burden. And the more they laughed, the more that imbalance of power grew. There were times I tried to ignore it, pretending the jokes were harmless. But deep inside, each remark chipped away at something sacred, the respect I had earned through decades of sacrifice. Their mockery was not just about age or frailty, was about erasing my dignity, reducing my presence to a punchline. In those moments, sitting quietly with a forced smile, I began to wonder if they had forgotten entirely who had built the very foundation they were now standing on. The seeds of mockery had been planted, watered with arrogance and impatience. What they didn't know, what none of them even suspected, was that beneath my silence lay a secret powerful enough to turn their laughter into shock. Legacies are not just written on paper or measured in money. They are carved from the sacrifices of generations. My estate, the one my family so casually mocked me for never having, was not born out of luck or sudden windfalls. It was the fruit of decades of labor, of choices made when life offered only hardship and responsibility. The land had been in our family for years, passed down from ancestors who worked it with their bare hands. Each corner carried memories of children running under the shade of old trees, of harvest seasons when laughter and sweat mingled, of nights when meals were modest but the sense of belonging was rich to me. The estate was more than property. It was dignity, a shield against dependency, a reminder that my worth was not defined by others' scorn. It symbolized independence, a quiet assurance that despite their dismissive words, I had secured stability. Yet I chose to keep it hidden. My silence was deliberate, born from watching the greed that slowly poisoned family bonds. I had seen how entitlement grew when wealth was flaunted, how respect turned transactional, and how affection became conditional. I could not bear the thought of my legacy being reduced to another battlefield for arrogance, so I buried the truth behind humility, letting them believe I was penniless. I wore their mockery like a cloak, knowing what they didn't, that every jeer only deepened the suspense of the day they would learn what I had truly protected. The shift from subtle dismissals to open humiliation was gradual, yet undeniable. At first, their laughter came in hushed tone-side comments they thought I couldn't hear, exchanged glances that dismissed me as irrelevant. But soon the curtain of pretense lifted and their mockery grew bold, almost theatrical. I remember one evening vividly. The living room was full, the air thick with chatter and clinking glasses. Once central to family decisions was now drowned out by ridicule. I suggested a way to handle a minor financial matter, only to be met with smirks. Why would we take advice from someone who couldn't even secure their future? One nephew scoffed. The room erupted in laughter, and in that moment I felt the sting of betrayal sharper than any wound. Another time, as I walked in with groceries, my daughter-in-law whispered just loudly enough for me to hear, "Look at her still running errands like a servant, penniless and pitiful." The words cut deep, leaving me breathless for a second. I wanted to shout, to defend myself, to remind them of all the years I had carried this family through storms they couldn't imagine. But instead, I stood silent. My dignity, my only armor. Each insult was meant to strip me of power, to reduce me to an afterthought. They laughed as if I were a burden, a relic of the past whose presence was tolerated rather than valued. The humiliation burned, but alongside the pain, a quiet strength grew. I let their cruelty wash over me, knowing what they didn't, that beneath their arrogance lay a secret so powerful it would one day silence them all. For now, I endured. I refused to let their disrespect unravel me, because restraint was my greatest weapon. My silence was not weakness. It was the patience of someone who held the ultimate truth, waiting for the perfect moment to reveal it. When mockery takes root in a family, it spreads like poison, silent, unseen, yet devastating in its reach. After the night of open insults, something shifted in the air around me. Conversations grew colder, and the warmth of family gatherings faded into awkward silences. Where once I had been greeted with respect, I was now met with perfunctory nods. As though my presence was an inconvenience, whispers began to trail behind me. In the kitchen, I caught the low murmurs of cousins exchanging pity-laced remarks. "It's sad, really. She has nothing left." In the living room, my words were drowned in dismissive sighs, as if my very voice no longer mattered. Each glance, each smirk, each hushed tone reminded me of the betrayal I endured, not just from one family member, but from the collective silence of the others who chose not to defend me. The cruelty reached beyond the walls of our home. Neighbors, once warm and respectful, now carried stories twisted by exaggeration. I noticed the way they looked at me, sympathetic, yet condescending, as though I were a fallen figure, stripped of relevance. The humiliation was no longer private, become public, a spectacle of my supposed decline. Even within the family, loyalties shifted. A few remained quietly supportive, offering me small gestures of kindness, a reassuring touch on the arm, a seat saved at the table, but their voices were drowned out by those who aligned themselves with the louder, crueler faction. It was easier, after all, to side with arrogance than to defend dignity. Betrayal had spread like wildfire, leaving me standing on scorched ground. The weight of this new reality pressed heavily on me. My place in the family, once unquestionable, was now treated as negotiable. They looked through me, around me, past me as though I were already gone, my existence reduced to a shadow in the corner. And yet, beneath the ache of betrayal, something stronger stirred. I carried within me the knowledge of a truth no one else could see. Their cruelty, their whispers, their shifting loyalties, all of it, was built on a lie they had told themselves, that I was powerless, penniless, and broken. They had no idea that in mocking me, they were only tightening the noose of their own downfall. The atmosphere grew heavier with each passing day. But so did my resolve. While my family busied themselves with laughter at my expense, I was quietly laying the foundation for a truth that would one day silence every cruel word. Their mockery never saw the nights I spent at my desk, poring over documents, rereading the fine print, and ensuring that every decision I made was locked in stone. I was not careless, nor did I act in haste. I acted with patience, knowing that dignity is not defended with noise, but with preparation. The will was not simply written, it was crafted with foresight. My trusted lawyer, a man who had served me for decades, knew my wishes intimately. Together we ensured that every asset, every piece of property, every hard-earned legacy was accounted for and secured beyond manipulation. Signatures were witnessed, documents notarized, and the will sealed in a way that no scheming relative could contest. What they thought was my silence was actually my shield. Resilience, I learned, was not about enduring insults in the moment, but about preparing for the moment when truth would be revealed. I kept my composure when they mocked me because I knew what they didn't. My future and theirs had already been written on parchment, sealed with law and secured by justice. There were days when the temptation to speak up clawed at me, to shout that I was not powerless, not penniless. But I resisted. Words could be twisted, but paper and ink, signed and witnessed, spoke louder than any voice. In those moments of silence, I found strength. I let their arrogance blind them because it was better that way. The quieter I remained, the louder the revelation would be. Patience became my companion. I endured the humiliation with steady breaths, reminding myself that storms pass, but foresight endures. Every smirk, every whisper, every dismissive glance, they were fuel, strengthening my resolve to wait for the right moment. And when that moment came, it would not be with tears or anger, but with the quiet dignity of truth unveiled. The secret will was more than legal protection, was a testament to my resilience, my refusal to be erased, and my determination to leave behind not just assets, but a lesson that wisdom is the greatest shield against betrayal. The stage was set. The lawyer waited. My silence had been long, but it would not be in vain. Soon, their arrogance would collide with the one thing they had underestimated: my preparation. The day came, wrapped in the same tension that had haunted my home for months. My family gathered, faces marked with the smug certainty that I had no defenses left. They thought they had one, that my silence was proof of surrender. They smirked, whispered, and waited for me to fold under the weight of their arrogance. But what they didn't know was that every cruel laugh, every insult, every dismissal had only brought us closer to this very moment. I sat quietly at the head of the table, their mocking glances cutting through the air. The daughter-in-law's smirk lingered longest, as if she already envisioned her hands on what she believed to be hers. My hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the gravity of what I was about to reveal. When I reached into my bag and placed the sealed envelope on the table, silence fell. Their laughter froze in their throats. "This," I said calmly, "is the truth you never cared to ask about." The lawyer, seated beside me, broke the seal with deliberate precision. He read aloud the words that I had so carefully prepared months ago, words that transferred every property, every account, every hidden fortune to the people I chose, not the ones who mocked me. The same faces that had once looked at me with contempt now turned pale, eyes darting from the lawyer to the papers, desperately searching for a flaw, a loophole, a way out. But there was none. Gasps filled the room. The daughter-in-law's smirk collapsed into disbelief. Her confidence, once unshakable, shattered with every sentence spoken. The relatives who had joined her in mockery sat in stunned silence, unable to mask their shame. What they thought was my weakness had been my greatest strength. Foresight. The lawyer paused, looked directly at them, and chuckled a sound so sharp it sliced through the heavy air. It wasn't just laughter. It was the echo of their defeat, the public acknowledgement that their greed had been outmatched by my preparation. That laugh carried the weight of karma itself, turning their mockery back on them. In that moment, I didn't need to gloat or raise my voice. The truth spoke for me. Their arrogance had been built on sand, and now it crumbled in front of everyone. Some hung their heads in shame, others glared in anger, but none could erase what had been revealed. For the first time in a long while, I felt the weight of betrayal lift. Their scorn had tried to bury me, but the will had resurrected my dignity. No longer was I the powerless elder they had mocked. I was the guardian of a legacy, the architect of foresight. And the proof that silence is not weakness, but strategy. The revelation was not just about wealthy, was about justice. It was about showing them that cruelty carries consequences, and arrogance eventually collapses under the weight of truth. And as their disbelief hung in the air, I knew the balance of power had shifted forever. In the quiet that followed the revelation, I found myself reflecting not only on what had been exposed, but also on what had been endured. The betrayal had cut deep not because of the inheritance itself, but because of what it revealed about the hearts of those I once trusted. It is one thing to lose property or money, but quite another to lose faith in family. Their laughter at my tears, their mockery of my supposed poverty, had left scars that no document could erase. Yet as I sat in that silence, I realized that resilience is not born from ease, but from storms weathered without surrender. Some members of the family who had remained quiet during the cruelty began to step forward. Their eyes were heavy with regret, their voices low but sincere. They spoke of shame for not defending me sooner, for watching silently while others mocked. Their remorse did not erase the pain, but it opened a door, a chance to rebuild trust slowly through action rather than words. These were the ones who understood that dignity mattered more than wealth, that loyalty was worth more than signatures and deeds. On the other hand, those who had led the mockery now stood in isolation. Their arrogance had crumbled, leaving behind hollow pride and bitterness. They tried to mask their humiliation with excuses, but the truth was undeniable. They had revealed their greed, and in doing so, had lost their place in the heart of the family. No amount of forced smiles or hollow apologies could erase the image of their smirks turning to shame when the lawyer read the will. Their downfall was not orchestrated by revenge, but by their own arrogance. As I thought about all of this, deeper truth revealed itself. Preparation had been my shield, but foresight had been my true weapon. The will was not written in anger. It had been prepared long before the insults, crafted in patience and clarity. Its power was not just in securing the estate, but in protecting dignity, ensuring that greed would never dictate the course of my legacy. That, I realized, was the real triumph. Not the humiliation of the arrogant, but the preservation of values. That could not be mocked away. The lesson was clear. Wealth may draw envy, but integrity commands respect. Arrogance may roar loudly, but foresight whispers with more power. My journey through betrayal had shown me that strength is not in answering every insult, but in standing firm, allowing truth to reveal itself in time. Silence, paired with preparation, becomes a form of justice no mockery can withstand. To the family members who returned with sincerity, I offered forgiveness not as a gift to them, but as liberation for myself. Holding on to anger would have chained me to the very pain I sought to overcome. To those who remained bitter, I offered nothing but distance. Not every relationship can be healed, and not every wound needs to be reopened. As I reflected, I understood that my story was bigger than me. It was a reminder that dignity must always outweigh greed, that foresight triumphs over arrogance, and that betrayal cannot erase resilience. In the end, my legacy was not the land, the houses, or even the fortune. My legacy was the proof that one can endure cruelty without becoming cruel, that one can be mocked yet rise with dignity intact. That, I knew, would outlast every smirk, every insult, every false word spoken against me. They once mocked me as weak, their laughter echoing louder than any words of comfort. In their eyes, I was a burden, a powerless elder clinging to dignity while stripped of worth. They believed the story ended there, with me fading quietly into obscurity. Yet what they never understood was that strength does not always roar, sometimes waits, silently preparing until the right moment to speak arrives. That moment came when the secret will was revealed, and the same mouths that had mocked me fell silent under the weight of truth. The will was not a weapon of revenge, but a testament to foresight. It carried within it not only wealth, but also values, sacrifice, resilience, and dignity that had built the legacy in the first place. In that revelation, arrogance was humbled, greed was exposed, and true character was unmasked. The contrast was sharp. Those who mocked were diminished, while those who respected stood affirmed. As I look back, I see the mocking as a mirror, revealed what was inside their hearts more clearly than any words of mine ever could. But the will, carefully guarded, became the safeguard of both legacy and truth. It ensured that those who valued family, loyalty, and integrity would be entrusted with the future, while those blinded by arrogance would inherit only their own isolation. In the end, the moral is simple yet unshakable. True wealth lies not only in money, but in wisdom. Preparation protects against betrayal. Foresight dismantles arrogance, and dignity outlives mockery. My story does not end with the laughter of others, but with the quiet assurance that strength is never measured by noise. It is measured by patience, resilience, and the clarity to act at the right time. They thought I was powerless. They thought I was penniless. But foresight proved stronger than arrogance, and dignity proved louder than cruelty. The legacy is secured, not just in fortune, but in the truth that those who stand firm, even when mocked, will always have the final word.